So for the first few weeks, we'll explore aspects of culture, identity, and how that impacts the interpreting process, or how the interpreting process needs to be aware and take those things into account. So maybe when you first started thinking about interpreting, you thought it was simply a matter of knowing the signs for the words. And as you go through this semester and through the entire program, what you'll grasp is, hopefully, the enormity of the task and how at many levels it's impacted by the layers of identity that each person in the interaction holds or has, including the interpreter. We used to think that the interpreter was invisible, but and that's what we should strive to do. But more recent research, and you've read or will read about role space, and Melanie Metzger's work, that deconstructing the myth of neutrality. Basically, we understand now that we're not neutral. We can't be neutral. We're living human beings in the middle of an interaction, and we have to acknowledge and account for that. So the first thing that I want you to do is take a look at primary and secondary characteristics. Because when we think about culture, typically what do you think of? You think of race, ethnicity, and we very often in our society forget about all of the things that makes us who we are. So we have a set of primary characteristics, and those are the characteristics with which we're born. And we have what I call secondary characteristics, or those things that we could be born with, and we can change them, though it's not easy to change, but we can change them. So we can change our educational status. We can change whether we smoke or don't smoke. We can't change our parents, but we can change the influence of our parents. So what I want you to do is first identify your own primary and secondary characteristics, and that's provided for you on the activity sheet. And then the second part of this activity is for you to go out and find two people, and you don't physically have to go out. You can just think of these two people, one with whom you interact easily with, communicate easily with, the other who you have some struggles communicating with. And I want you to identify their primary and secondary characteristics. You don't have to ask them these things. You can guess. You can ask if you want, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can just make an educated guess. And then when you're finished with that, I want you to then look at how similar or different you are from those two types of people. Most typically, we're going to be more similar with the one that we communicate well with, and more different with the one with whom we struggle communicating. So that's an activity just to help you identify the primary and secondary characteristics of yourself and other people, because those things are important as we go to interpret. When, let's say, for example, the meaning of a sentence or an utterance is constructed based on the context, and the context is dependent on the people interacting within that context. So if you're in an office building and someone says, "It's almost 10 o'clock," you might think, from your own experience or your own background, okay, great, they get to go on break. But if you don't know that those people are smokers, then "it's almost 10 o'clock" has a completely different meaning. And we have to understand what those meanings are in order to interpret them correctly. Because if we just interpreted "it's almost 10 o'clock," that still doesn't provide the meaning that maybe we'll go on break. and so the more we know about the environment, which means the more we know about the people, the more we know about their backgrounds, the more we know about their relationships, things like that, the more able we are to actually interpret the messages. We can transliterate the message all day, and that's just pretty much garbage in, garbage out. I hear the words, I sign the words. I see signed words, I just say what they're signing. But if we don't understand the meaning behind those utterances, which is not spoken, that's information that comes with the people who are interacting, the place where they're interacting, their purpose for being there interacting, and all of those 11 P's that we'll talk about. If we don't know those things, then our interpretations are very shallow and devoid of actual meaning, which is all the other information that's not in the words. So that's the primary and secondary characteristic activity. Have fun with that.